So we've got a great panel today. On my left, we've got Matthew Roche, is Principal Data Warrior, part of the Power BI team. Sarah Francis is a product lead for YouGov. Eugene
Meidinger. It's German. It's hard to pronounce. I'm sorry.
Eugene, making BI accessible. And I'm Simon Sabin. I'm the reason you're here. I run this thing, so welcome. So just quickly introduce yourselves and go over to Matt and who you are.
I won't correct him on the name.
Matthew, I so apologize.
Is it on?
No.
They did a check.
They did a check. Oh, you guys can hear. All right, we can hear him. We can't hear me. So hey everyone. My name is Matthew Roche. I'm a program manager on the Power BI Kent team. And as a question for Simon, is this where we want to do our?
We'll do that afterwards.
All righty, then that's all I have. Sarah.
Thank you. Hi, still not on. I'm Sarah Francis. I am a product lead at YouGov. So YouGov is a data and analytics platform company. You may have heard of us from our political work. And I'm just very happy to be with you today.
I guess I don't need a mic. That's going to end badly.
You don't need the mic.
Yeah. So my name is Eugene Meidinger. I got told I was going to be on this panel about an hour ago, and I get paid to be aggressively empathetic. So I make training content, and that means putting myself in other people's shoes on a daily basis. So that's what I do.
And yeah, as I said, I'm Simon Sabin. And one of the reasons that I really wanted to do this panel was I've been on a journey for about 5 years. 2 of my kids have got diagnosed as autistic. And during that process, what I figured out is there were loads of things that we got taught about how to deal with people. And me, in my day job, I was sitting there in customer meetings with 30, 40-year-old blokes, females, and realizing that most of the people that I work with have no appreciation about their mental capability and their mental health. And so this is the reason for the discussion. So hopefully you can take away some of the things that we've figured out over the years to help you in your day job. Eugene, so give me one thing that's sort of relative to mental health that you that these people might relate to.
Oh, okay. Well, so let's see. So I'm going to be giving a talk on Saturday about dealing with depression. And ever since college, I've dealt with depression and anxiety. And for the longest time, I thought it was my fault, right? I thought it was a personal failing. I'm a guy. I'm supposed to be strong, never supposed to cry, any of that stuff. And then I got diabetes and realized, oh, I have a chemical dependency both on insulin and serotonin. And maybe I should be nicer to myself and try to systematize a way to be kind to myself and treat it.
Cool, thank you.
Is this on?
Oh.
They keep nodding.
They keep nodding.
Do you want to hold it closer?
Hello. Okay, so I was diagnosed with ADHD, which I'm sure most people here have heard of. Throughout pretty much my whole life, from a teenager, I was anxious, I suffered with depression, and I had various different types of medication for that. And none of them really worked. So they took the edge off. They didn't really make me feel better or make me feel how I thought I should feel. And it was actually during the pandemic that I started to read about ADHD and neurodivergence and think, oh my gosh, that is me. One of my best friends used to say, I can't believe how quickly you think, how fast your brain works. And I just thought that was normal. I thought that was regular. And the way I've described it to people is it's like when you have loads of tabs open all at once and you're trying desperately to flick between them and you just can't focus on one thing. Now, for me, the one thing I would love people to know is that it's not, so for ADHD, it's not a thing that little boys have that means they fidget and they can't sit still in the corner, right? It's kids with ADHD grow up to be adults with ADHD, and that comes with superpowers. So for me, that's being able to join the dots and learn insanely quickly. I joined YouGov 9 months ago, got thrown into a project which was awesome, and within 2 or 3 weeks, I was up to speed on that, and people were like, oh my god, how have you learned that quickly? That's a superpower, but there's challenges, and we'll talk about that.
Thank you very much.
Ooh.
So I'm going to riff on all three of these because all three of these stories have a lot of truth for me. So for me, my upbringing, like when I was a child, my father did not manage his mental health. So whether it was his bipolar, his depression, whatever it was like this was the family secret that nobody talked about, that everybody knew. And it wasn't until my children, over the last few years, were diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, with ADHD, with anxiety, with depression, and they started getting the help that I needed as a child, that I realized that the behaviors that I had seen in them, that I'd seen and recognized in myself and had tried to hide in my professional self, oh, that's what that is. There's something going on. And once there was a name, there was something that I could Google. There was help that I could ask for. But rather than the many tabs open, the analogy that I used to use is that I have too many non-clustered indexes on the heap, right? This is the only audience that is ever going to get that analogy. So for me, learning has always been, it seems like I work 10 times as hard as anybody else. Like inserts and updates are really, really slow. But once I get it, I am the go-to person on this topic and that topic and so on and so forth, because I can connect all of the dots, because I have an index in every damn table, or every column on every table, and being in that position where I can bring that empathy so that it's not just me learning about myself for myself, but I'm at the CAT team, the Power BI CAT team at Microsoft, I'm in a position where I can reach and touch many people on many teams. I can now make room for them so that the people that would have been struggling without someone making the space in the room in that conversation, that they can shine in ways that they otherwise might not. And Saturday morning, 8:10, I'm actually doing a dedicated session on this. Simon stole my superpower bit, so if you come to my session, there will be lots of pictures of superheroes.
Cool. Thank you very much. Firstly, what I'd like to ask is, here, how many people would consider themselves having superpowers that many people would think sort of not the norm? Okay. So I believe, as an industry, we probably have a high prevalence of people that are like just think differently. That's why we are in tech. We associate with these things, and I think the big challenge that I find is that I equate very much with Sarah's comment. Given my kids' journey, I expect that I am probably somewhere on there. If you speak to any of the organisers of SQLBits, they will probably attest to all the aspects that Sarah mentioned. I am massively, I can take the big picture, I can understand it all. Detail, that's my superpower. I can take that big picture, a bit like Matthew, and I can really just analyze it, get an answer really quickly. However, that does come with a load of other problems, which we can talk about. So I think we've talked a bit about superpowers. Are there any other superpowers that you would sort of think that people have as part of their mental capability?
So for 4 years, I worked for an autism charity, and that was eye-opening for me. I didn't know anything about autism spectrum disorders before I joined, so I learned a ton. And we actually employed autistic people to work for us in our centre, and I was lucky enough to manage them. And they weren't working in tech, they were doing sort of reception roles, managing a sensory room. And what always blew my mind as a thing that I think everyone should remember is that sometimes people don't know something until you tell them. And we've all got this thing as humans where we think that people think like us. And when you're dealing with anyone really, but especially people with any kind of neurodiversity, don't make assumptions. Don't assume that they know a thing just because you do.
it really chimed with me, and I've taken that to all my jobs.
I would love session, so I want to riff on that because one of the things that I think has been valuable for me and the team that I work with is recognizing exactly what Sarah just said about not everyone having the same context or understanding what everyone in the room understands. And when I got to a position where I was comfortable enough with my own ignorance to raise my hand and say, what's that thing? Keep using that term, what does it mean? Or why are we here? Like, what's the goal of this meeting? You've got 20 people in a room, you know, what is it that we're trying to achieve? And I did this for me, but it used to be, and this is of course pre-pandemic, when we're leaving the room, and like Microsoft, it's all like meeting after meeting after meeting, but as everybody is walking from one meeting room to the next one, it started being that after every single meeting, 3 or 4 people would come up to me and say, oh, thank you, Matthew, for asking that question. I wanted to ask it, but I was afraid that I'd look stupid. And I figured I looked stupid already, so there was nothing to lose. And I realized that it wasn't just me that was being excluded by everyone that thought that everyone was the same.
Real quick and then,
Can I ask you a question, Matthew? Why do you think you are stupid? Why is that? How would you?
So the question is, why would I describe myself as stupid in that regard? So part of it is just self-deprecating humor, but there is a perception, and different cultures, like different countries, have different ways that this shows up. But there's a perception that if someone is sharing information, they have in their mind the context of the baseline of knowledge in the room. And if you don't meet that baseline, that's on you. Like, you failed to meet the prerequisites, you failed to meet the bar. And that was the concept that I was trying to get across by using, perhaps inappropriately, the term stupid. But what I found was, again and again and again, the challenge was not the people in the room failing to meet the prerequisites. It was the person owning the room, the person driving the conversation, that had failed to be explicit about the prerequisites that they had expected to be met. And it took someone with the confidence to be vulnerable in front of a group to bring that to the fore, to raise all the boats, as it were.
Yeah, and why I'm asking because if you keep telling yourself and others that you are stupid, they will start to believe in you. So I think that's a good idea to go out and acknowledge that you're stupid, because you're not stupid. You're a human being, and you're an intelligent human being.
I think so. The commentary is that you shouldn't go and keep saying you're stupid, and I would say stupid is just about the level of knowledge you have on something, and you might have noticed that we have 20-minute sessions and 50-minute sessions here, and that's one of my drivers for this event because. But interestingly, that a lot of people, from a speaking perspective, don't like the shorter content because they want to give lots of information. And for me, words are an awful means of communication. Yeah. Because there is so much meaning in words, and there is so much information in sentences, and you have to not only understand the words in the sentence, the sentences in the context of what's in my head because I've said them. All of that is really hard, and to the point that, like Matthew has said, like if you're in a room and the person has said something which makes ultimate sense on top of what is in their head. However, in your head, you don't have their head, so it doesn't make sense. And that power of being able to go, excuse me, that doesn't make sense, is super important.
So related to what Matthew was talking about, so for me, like I might be somewhere on the spectrum. I've never gotten tested, but I do know, if nothing else, in my 20s, I didn't understand any social norms. I didn't like small talk because to me I'm an introvert, and so the taxi cab meter starts running the moment you start talking. So if you talk about your dog, that's a $5 bill or a 5-pound bill to hear about the weather. I'm not interested, right? And I didn't understand just some of the basic formalities, like why do we always have to say please and thank you of everything? Like I just want to get down to business. And so I read a lot of books, and I learned why like you need to warm up a conversation, or why basic courtesies are nice. But one of the nice things about that is if social norms don't come intuitively to you, then you can actually look at them a little bit more objectively, like, I'm going to keep these, I'm going to get rid of these. Why are meetings always an hour? No one asks, because that's what we do around here, right? And so I think that can be a superpower, is just having the comfort and courage to be like, why? Why are we doing this? Is this a good thing? And then keep the ones you like being nice to people, being courteous. Yeah, well.
And, yes.
Just a quick one. Firstly, how do you feel about when people are saying these things, etc., etc., and you are going straight back in with a honest and open response, and they get offended? And secondly, we do have some people online that are having difficulty hearing still, even with that microphone. Is there any way we could pass around one of these ones? I've checked with the audio guys, they're trying their best, but they're okay. And finally, if you get a question from the floor, just state it back.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yep.
Just say, to me it sounded when you were speaking really at the top of the microphone. It came up, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I will put this back on then. So I think that's a really interesting question about like if someone comes back like immediately, and we talked about superpowers. We also have the opposite, which is the pains and the problems. And anybody that's been in a session with me in the audience will probably get really narked, because I am able to get down to the ultimate detail. Excuse me, excuse me, excuse me, and that's really bad. Now, I've probably, when I was 35, 40, I had an epiphany. I was in a client meeting, and I just had this realization: I should stop. I need to take some time. I need to let other people in the room partake, and because they're not, back to the point about what knowledge you've got, they're not at the same point. And so my job is to try and figure out how I can get them up to the same level, because me going ahead doesn't help. So I need to bring everyone in the room together. So that's definitely something that you've got to manage, and one of the challenges that I think people do face.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on top of that, really. One of the things I learned quite early on in my career was that my boss told me it doesn't matter, you'll go super far when you stop caring who gets credit. And for me, this was like a massive values thing. It was somebody else, I've done all this work, and somebody else is up there getting the credit for it, and it just felt unethical and unfair. And unfairness is a massive
Fairness.
It doesn't matter what it is, it can really set me off and make me emotional. And he told me that, and I took it away and thought about it. Thought, yeah, actually, this is right. That was the start of the journey. So later on, it became, Sarah, you need to slow down. You've walked into the room, you know how the meeting's going to end before it's even started. You've figured out, you've got a little flow chart in your mind of what everyone's going to say, and you're already at the end, and you're sitting there fidgeting, you're getting irritated visibly that these people are so slow and they can't keep up. But you need everyone to get there. You need to take people on the journey with you. For me, if you don't do that, like, you're there at the finish line, but you're on your own, and that kind of sucks. Not for you.
I do think there's an interesting angle in that depending on the organisation you're in, if you're in a startup with 4 people, that's epic. I mean, having someone that can go and just knock everything out of the park. But if you're in an organisation that most people are in, where you have teams and you have organisation, understanding how you bring the team on is super critical.
So I love Sarah's story, and I want to ask, and I'm gonna share a bit, and then I'm gonna ask, but I want to know how you brought them along, because that's a hard thing to do, to slow down, to walk with everyone instead of racing ahead. But one of the things that I find that's really super valuable at Microsoft is that at Microsoft, it doesn't matter who gets the credit, because we have this concept that we call impact. what you do as an individual contributor on your own, like the work you do, the work that you do that builds on the work of others, and the work that you do that enables the success of others. And for the folks that are on my team, anytime that I see them reaching out to another team for help, I'm like, you need to write that down, because when you're filling out your Connect, like your semi-annual performance review, this is an impact-driving event right here, because you made the right connection with the right team to ask them, just as if you were like enabling another team to build on your work. Not every organization has that culture, but you don't need to get credit for it as long as the impact is there and people recognize the role that you play. But I want to hear how you slowed down.
So my trick, and it's not a particularly challenging one, is to set context. So at YouGov, I look after our panel products team. So we've got 15 million panelists around the world who answer surveys and give us data, and we package that data up and we sell it to customers. It's all very ethical and lovely, but ultimately, those 15 million people, if they don't stick around, we don't have a business. So with my guys now, my product managers and my engineers, how can I slow down? How can I give you what you need to understand why the work you're doing is important? And that's my job, is setting that context. Slowing down is about how do I give you the space to ask questions? How do I make it easy to ask questions? How do I make you feel psychologically safe so you don't feel stupid for asking questions? And starting to build the culture where that is normal for us. And it starts with the leadership, and it starts with us. And it's slow, but I think if you can set that context for people and you can give them the reason for why they're doing what they're doing, answer their questions and support them in that way, and never criticize anyone for asking stuff, it's really quite satisfying, because you see people go on that journey, and that becomes, for me, as or more satisfying than being there fast. Knowing that my guys are there and they get it.
You mentioned context there. One of the things that I take is ownership, and it's very easy if you're running ahead, you end up owning it. If you own it, like, you've got a problem, because you're essentially the point of delivery and the scale aspect. Organizations can't scale unless other people can own things, and if they own it, then they can drive it forward. If there's only one person driving, you're going to go pretty slow. If you've got 50 people driving, then you're going to get 50 times more stuff done. So trying to share that ownership so that you don't take ownership, and it's really interesting how you can sort of feed, like put a seed so that someone eventually, it might take 2 weeks for someone to take a seed and run with it. But as you say, the feeling when you see them succeed is almost better than you succeeding, because someone else has done it based on some of the things that you've provided.
Can I just add to that? So I've got a guy on my team, he won't mind me sharing this. And he started out as an apprentice at YouGov, so he's not been to uni. He's grown his career with us. And his superpower, he's not neurodivergent at all, his superpower is he will not let something go, right? So he is the guy who, and I love this about him, and I tell him this weekly, if he doesn't understand something, he won't stop asking questions until he does. And what I'm working on him with right now is, I need you to ask those questions when other people are there, so that they feel that they can learn from that and grow from that. But the first step was him thinking, oh my God, I'm asking too many questions. I was like, no, don't become one of those people that just nods and smiles and pretends that you understand what's going on because you think you've asked the question enough. Help other people do that.
Where, as an individual, you think you're neurodivergent, all of us here are at a certain level, and we have probably overcome to a certain extent our own lack of self-confidence in terms of asking those questions. How can we support those that aren't in that?
So the question was, generally the people here have probably overcome some of those hurdles. How can we help those people that haven't to overcome? I take a little bit to start with, which is that I would probably argue that like masking is a big term in the industry, where like people, my son masks massively, so he has problems. But I think lots of adults grow up and mask and hide it, and I think this is a journey where you can open up and like have that conversation with people. You've got to understand yourself. Like one of the things is if you can't understand yourself, then that's the first start. Now other people can, like to your point, you can hopefully identify some traits in other people to help them understand themselves. But if they aren't going to understand it themselves, then that's a challenge. And that comes from a team or from a leader's perspective. And I would like to say that the past few years have meant that organizations are much more receptive to those conversations of, excuse me, like, don't give me 5 things at once. I can't cope with 5 things at once. My son, if I give him 2 things, pack your bag, brush your teeth, he will do 1. Like, don't give him a list of things. Like, give him 1 thing. And this is where I like to think, I'm a DevOps guy, that agility.
Small batches, right?
Yeah, the whole do things in small, take 1 ticket. It's almost like this stealth, like ADHD thing. It's like, like the industry has just sort of evolved into this model of like, just give someone 1 thing at a time so they can just concentrate on it. Yeah.
The other answer, and just to repeat the question that I'm answering, because I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, is what can we, as more senior people that are aware of some of the challenges that our superpowers have introduced in our lives, how can we open that door and make it easier for the people that may not have the safety, the power, the privilege, the positions that we have? Like we're on stage at SQLBits. We're like important people, right? Right, Simon?
Sure.
And
You take that away.
a lot of it, I brought it in. But a lot of it is using our voice to make sure that people see the struggle and the challenge that has gone into whatever success we've earned. Like we've fought for it. We have scars. Like we've cried between meetings. We've had the weeks where we couldn't get out of bed, but we still worked through it. And most people, they hide that. Like everybody, they want to put the successful face, the happy face forward because that's what the world has taught them that it wants to see. And if you're in a position of power, you're the boss, you're the speaker, you're the community leader, go out of your way when it fits in, when you're safe to do it, to say, I'm struggling and I need your help. I can't do this right now. Is there someone else that can do this? This thing that's really easy for you is really hard for me. Give it to someone that's not me. If you normalize it from your position of power, the people that really need it the most, that don't feel safe doing it, they will know that it's okay. And that to me is the biggest thing.
Yeah. And so
talking over to you.
Oh no, it's fine. No. I'm trying to equal pie slices. Well, and like so I work for myself, right? And so if I have to tell my boss that I can't get out of bed in the morning, I go talk to myself in a mirror, right? And so, I think 2 of the themes that come up there is the first step. The first step before you can help others is you have to build safety, right? You have to make sure that you can safely demonstrate these things. When at my last job, I was scared to let people know I had depression because I was scared I would get fired for it, right? But also you have to build forgiveness and understanding. And I'm still figuring that out, right? Like I have auditory sensory issues. If I have not slept well and you're eating food, I cannot filter it out. If you're having a conversation loudly, I cannot filter it out. If there's adverts before a pre-con, I can't filter it out. And so I bought $400 headphones for work, right? And I had to like talk to my husband, be like, this feels decadent. Like this doesn't feel okay. And he's like, if you had an employee and they said, $400 headphones, I'll be 10% more effective, I would write a check instantly, right? And so before you can help anyone else, you have to be able to be kind to yourself and love yourself, and you have to build that safety, right? Because Saturday I'm going to talk about depression, I'm going to cry on stage, and someone might tell me I'm unmanly, right? But I've built enough safety that Matthew will go beat them up for me, and it'll be fine.
When I'm done crying on stage.
Yeah.
I think I completely agree with that. So the extra dimension for me is I'm a woman. Now, one of the things I really struggle with is called emotional regulation. So if something triggers me, so it tends to be unfairness. But there's a model called SCARF, and look it up, Google it, SCARF model, and you can kind of understand what people's triggers are. But for me, I have to like suck it up. This is what it's like to live with ADHD. It's hard, but I'm really open with my team. So they've seen me work 15-hour days because I've been hyper-focused, and they're like, who are you? But they've also seen me take calls from my bed when I can't get out of bed because I'm exhausted, like mentally and emotionally, and I still have my camera on because I want to create a space for my team where it's okay to have a crap day. It's okay to be off, like it's human. And I think the more senior you get in an organization, it's not your job, it's almost your duty to make things better than they were when you were coming up through the ranks.
I think there's one thing. There's a book called The Explosive Child, and it talks about like kids blowing up and being angry, and it's like the whole premise is no one wants to fail. Like, hands up here, who likes failing? Right. Who likes succeeding and delivering? Right. Everybody, wants to succeed, and therefore, how do you help people succeed? If you're in a situation and someone isn't succeeding, like as a leader, as a colleague, try and understand what is getting in the way. It could be that they have a child at home that is sick. It could be that they have a relative that is doing something. They could be that they've just got too much stuff. They've got 3 bosses that have all given them too much work. They don't understand a bit of technology. They are from a culture that can't ask questions. Like, probably your biggest thing you can take away is try and figure out why people don't succeed. And if you look at some of those things, you can piece together that what it is that drives you and drives them that is stopping them from succeeding. So have a think about that. So did you have a question?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, obviously you've got succeed, you've got failure. I perspective, if I take a new bit of code, I found something and it works first time, that always really, really worries me.
Interesting. So the point was, if I've got a piece of code and it works first time, then I worry because it should have failed maybe, and so
If it's something that's right off the internet,
Right.
somebody else has written it and it's just slotted seamlessly into what you're achieving, it's like, that's going to come back and bite me.
that's too good.
Necessarily understand.
Oh, got a question over there.
I know most people like to say they like to succeed, but for myself, is sometimes I actually do like to fail on things because I tend to learn quite a lot about what I've done wrong and what the learnings are from that I can actually succeed next time if I'm repeating that something is to actually succeed the next time. So in actual fact, there are times where actually I'm quite glad I've actually failed on something.
I think for me it's...
Can I just repeat that? So the gentleman's comment was that for him, failing is actually succeeding. So the whole Edison light bulb thing, I've 99 times failing before I actually succeeded, and I think that's very apt. And in today's industry, having that safe place for you to get things wrong and say I haven't delivered. We're in a really pressured world. The sand is shifting, technology is shifting. You have to have that world, otherwise you aren't going to feel like you're succeeding. That doesn't mean actually delivering, so it just means that you are feeling happy about what you're doing.
Yeah, so You can't. I agree. Like failure is important. That's how we learn. But we want, small failures that we learn from, not big spectacular ones. where
DevOps.
things don't launch on time or don't work properly. And there's a balance between what the business needs, which is the things ideally to work really well and all the time, and then what humans need, which is opportunities to learn and grow. You've got to balance them.
And it's worth mentioning that Simon's question was not, is failure valuable or is success valuable? Success feels good. Failure feels like pain. Like you fell down, you skinned your knee, but the lessons that you learn through failure, that's what sticks with you, and that's where the real growth comes from. Like the people that are just gifted and everything always works the first time, most of them, they hit this wall where their growth stops because they never learn to learn. And the people, like from a martial arts background, Sarah would be the most amazing sword fighter ever because she is tiny, and in order to get any technique to work, she would need to do it absolutely right. I'm like 8 feet taller than she is. I can do the wrong thing and still win. In the long run, she's going to kick everybody's ass. And as managers, making environments where it is safe to fail, and where that early failing, like you run fast, you fail fast, when you recognize and reward those behaviors, this is how we get that healthy discussion around failure and its value, because it's one thing to say it, but it's a very different, and in my experience, more rare thing to live it or to have an organization that lives it.
Yeah, just real quick, there's a podcast I used to listen to called Manager Tools, and my favorite line from it is, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. Yeah.
Nice. I like that. I like that. So on the setting in a good environment, where do you think communication fits in that?
Everywhere. Do you want to?
That's not actionable.
Do you want a longer answer?
Well, I think I'm one of the anxiety things. I think you end up going down this horrible. How many people have been sitting there where they think there's something's going wrong? They go, oh, do I tell someone? No, I'm going to try and fix it, and it gets worse and worse and worse.
And I can't say something now because I didn't say something last week.
Yes, like when I dropped the table for a certain online website and suddenly realised there's no jobs on the website, and it's like, oh, well, I wonder why that is. But
So I want to share an example. I'm not going to name any names, but there was someone on my team over the past couple years where I had given a task. I need you to achieve this goal, and I need you to ask me questions if at any point it's not clear what you need to do. And we would meet at least once a week. We'd talk about it, like how are things going, it's really good, blah, blah, blah. It was never a problem, and there were never any questions. And as a manager, after a month or so of this, I knew that something was wrong, but I also knew that if I went in poking, it wasn't going to make anything better. So as the deadline approached and approached and approached, and everything is going to land, and then, oh, I'm sick this week, and then the following week, yeah, we're probably 3 months out. It was what I had expected at that point, but the conversation was, let's look at how we got here. This is all water under the bridge because this is a vital learning experience. Like we're never going to do this again, but you've learned a whole ton of stuff, and now let's look at what those original goals are. Let's have this discussion, and we realized that he was probably 75% of the way there because he'd done great work. He was just solving a different problem, and by the time that he realized it, it was too late to course correct. But that communication is at the core of all of this, because if we don't have that shared context, if we're not solving the same problems, if we're not working towards the same goals, we're not a team. We're just kind of like people in a room. And that communication sets and maintains the shared context that's necessary, but it's always different.
I think the context and goals that Sarah mentioned earlier, if you have that, it just means people have got the flexibility of knowing where they're going and what they're doing.
I think, just real quick, I think a lot of what you're talking about is lowering the transaction cost of communication, right? Because I'm an introvert, so the transaction cost starts high, right? And so if there's some way to normalize just sending like an async message like, hey, hey, I'm having trouble with this, can we talk sometime? That makes it so much easier to have regular communication. So you have to figure out what can I do to make it lower. So you had a question.
Yes. Just a little follow-up. A lot of big companies are doing personality tests. What color would you describe yourself as? There's red, yellow, green, and blue.
So the very first job that I had at Microsoft, I was the one individual contributor. All of my peers were managers of managers. And the person that replaced the hiring manager, she was really into this insights personality testing.
Yeah.
In our first LT meeting, Teresa said, all right, now all the reds in this corner, all the yellows here, all the greens here, all the blues here, because she wanted to see the makeup of her new team. And I got up on top of the conference room and I sat cross-legged in the middle. And I said, I'm a black. But you know, part of it is because I'm me, but most of it was because I'd never gone through the insights training because I was new to Microsoft. But my personal belief is that those systems, they might be necessary to scale, but they're useless for anything interpersonal. If I'm working with an individual, someone that reports to me, or someone that I report to, or a peer or colleague that I actually work with regularly, I need to know them, not some BS, colorful aggregate summary of who they are.
To change your color.
So
To change your color.
the question was, you can categorize people into colors: red, blue, yellow, green, I think, and
Phlegmatic, sanguine,
well, and
melancholy.
well, to the point is it's an aggregate, and I think it's a start, but really, as Matthew said, you need more detail.
For me, at my last job, they did the whole Myers-Briggs thing, and I was in my early 20s, and like you said, it's useless on a one-on-one basis, but man, someone just reminding me that different people are different. Like, some people enjoy small talk and thrive on that. It was a needed reminder, right? Some people are good at the big picture, but not as much the details. My boss we'd call him the tornado, right? He'd come and leave a mess, and you have to find a broom and clean up, but he was a visionary. He was an entrepreneur, right? And so it's helpful to be reminded that, different people are different.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
Oh, sorry.
That's fine. So I actually disagree with
Okay.
that. So yes, they do work on an aggregate level, but they're also shortcuts. So one of the things I get my teams to do when I join a new team or hire new people is the free version of the Myers-Briggs test, which you can get online. And that enables us to have a conversation about how they like to work, whether they think that's accurate about them. It gives you a prompt for follow-up questions.
It's a starting point. It starts the dialogue, especially if you never know how to have this conversation before. That makes sense.
It's a hack,
Yeah.
And I think your point about realizing that people are different. I mean, you're not taught that at school. Like sitting in a meeting and realize that there are some people that love X, love Y, and I think that's, if you can understand that and enable people, you give the guy that is great at the detail, give it to him, but don't give him like really constrained timeframes, because he's just gonna fail. So all of those little things really, really come into their own.
Well, the goal of school is the opposite, right? It's to get everyone to fit in the same box and just nail down the nail that's a little bit too high. And so it's literally the opposite. We try to learn how to all be the same, and it turns out that doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we need
One more thing
go
I
on.
want to share. After this session is done, for the folks that are here in person, at least some of us, and it's probably only me because these two just got pulled in last minute and Simon is way too busy.
Oh, I'll definitely join.
I'll show.
But if you want to keep the conversation going, come on over to the community zone. We'll be hanging out for the next hour or so, basically having a less formal version of this conversation. If you're interested in joining, you'll be very welcome, so please do.
So we need to wrap up. So I think if we go down the line and sort of a key takeaway that you'd like people to take away.
My feet really hurt, and I should have broken these boots in more before coming to the conference.
Thank you. That's inspiring. Yeah, so mine would be, it sounds really obvious, people are individuals, but models help, hacks help to shortcut those conversations, and be vulnerable, allow yourself to be open about your struggles so that it makes it safe for other people to do the same.
Yeah, I think what I said before, the first thing is you have to be safe and you have to be kind to yourself before you can start expanding this outwards. And so that's the very first step, is safety and kindness.
Yeah, and I would say understand why you aren't succeeding or other people aren't succeeding, and there's some really hard choices. If you find that you aren't succeeding and the organization situation you're in isn't going to adapt to help you succeed, you're in the wrong place. Like, you've got to take some hard choices to look after yourself, and if you are fine, help others do the same thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you could fill in the feedback form, that would be awesome. If you didn't know, because I think we've been pretty poor at communicating this, for every 10 feedback forms, we're going to plant a tree, because we're not doing paper forms this year, so we thought we'd plant trees instead. So please fill in the feedback forms as much as you can throughout the conference, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the time. And anybody that wants to join us over, where are we doing it, Matthew?
The community zone.
Yeah, then come and join us and carry on the conversation. Thank you.